Thank you for joining us. We are here visiting the immense state of Alaska, a land of superlatives and adventure consisting of 5 distinct regions: the Inside Passage, the South Central and Interior regions, and the far north and southwest. Alaska's landscape has an astounding number of parks and public lands that offer outdoor adventures at just about every single turn. In addition, there's a broad range of cities and towns, communities and culture that all have unique activities and attractions. We will meet some of the directors and vice presidents of state and local tourism boards and resorts who will tell us more about the spectacular state of Alaska, including members of the Jewish community here, also known as the Frozen Chosen, following these messages. With us now is Ron Wolfson, and we're at the tap system pipeline in just outside, actually, Fairbanks, Alaska. It's a pleasure to have you with us, sir.
Thank you very much.
Please tell us the significance and importance of this pipeline.
Well, it certainly helps the domestic production of oil for the United States and keeps us from total dependence on foreign oil. It's been dropping, the capacity of the pipeline has been dropping over the last few years because of the lower amounts of oil in the reservoirs up at Prudhoe Bay underground.
This is most interesting, Ron. Please tell us how this pipeline was constructed and what the significance of it is from an engineering point of view.
The oil pipeline was constructed to help mitigate the Arab oil embargo of the 70s and bring domestic production of oil to the United States. It was constructed with a no-strike clause during the Nixon administration, and it's 800 miles long, bringing oil from the oil fields of Prudhoe Bay to Valdez, Alaska.
Ron, please kindly tell us how this works from an engineering point of view.
The vertical supports here are to stabilize the pipeline sections that are above ground. They're full of ammonia, which boils at approximately room temperature, draws the heat out of the pipe where it goes up to these aluminum radiators, and the heat is dumped to the atmosphere. Then the ammonia condenses and returns to the pipe and continues to draw the heat out of the ground so the pipeline remains stable in this discontinuous permafrost. On the sides of the pipe you see these bumpers, which are designed to absorb the shock in the event the pipe has to move, like as it has during some of the earthquakes and ground shifting in Alaska since its construction. And this protects the pipe and protects the uprights from being damaged during the movements.
Ron, this is absolutely fascinating. Please tell us about the retired pig and what pigs are in this business altogether.
Well, the crude oil contains a certain amount of paraffin waxes and other impurities that will deposit themselves on the inside of the pipe. The pig is injected into the pipe, and it spins as it goes through the pipe and cleans all the deposit off the insides of the pipe so that the oil can flow smoothly, and it's also to help prevent corrosion from occurring inside the pipeline. This is a representation of the state of Alaska and the route of the pipeline as it passes from Prudhoe Bay down to the port of Valdez. And it's been cut out of a section of the actual pipeline itself and then mounted inside a piece of the pipeline, so it gives you an idea of the diameter.
And where are we now in relation to this map?
We're approximately right here, just north of Fairbanks.
We are now on the campus of the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Ron, tell us of the significance and what is unique about this university.
It's a university that specializes in studying the circumpolar areas of the United States, Alaska, and the Northern Hemisphere. Behind me is the Geophysical Institute, which studies from the center of the Earth to the center of the Sun. It's an international cooperation, and a lot of other nations have sent delegates and do a lot of research here as well. The university also has its own rocket range, and they send a lot of instrumentation satellites and packages up into the upper atmosphere to study the aurora borealis and other phenomena of the ionosphere and upper atmosphere.
Ron, this is an absolutely beautiful day we are witnessing here in Fairbanks, and I'm really very impressed with the view and the climate and everything. But here at the university, tell us what else is outstanding about this university.
Well, the university was originally the Alaska School of Agriculture and Mines. There's still a working agriculture facility here at the university. The School of Mines is still active, and a lot of students come from around the world here to study petroleum engineering. Because of the oil industry here in Alaska, we have a lot of specialized classes and education, especially for students coming from India and China as they develop their energy sources for the 21st century.
Ron, you just mentioned students from different countries, and it brings to mind the fact that you happen to be a Jewish gentleman living here in Fairbanks, of all places, for more than 30 years. Tell us about the Jewish community of Fairbanks.
Well, I'd have to say it's an eclectic mix. There are a lot of people from all over, and we don't stand on a lot of ceremony. The congregation is open to everybody, and we have a lot of people come and visit and that are not Jewish and want to observe the congregation and the workings of a synagogue here in Alaska.
What I find amusing is the community is called the Frozen Chosen. Elaborate a little more on this.
It's called the congregation calls itself the Or HaSafon, which is the light of the north, which is kind of a play on words that the Jewish tradition is to help bring light to the rest of the world. And because it's winter half of the year, we like to refer to ourselves as the Frozen Chosen.
Ron, this has been most interesting, and I really appreciate you spending time with us and showing us around Fairbanks. A great pleasure. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
I'll be right back. With us now is Jack Bonney. Jack, it's a real pleasure to have you with us today.
The pleasure is all mine.
Please tell our audience what you do for tourism in Anchorage, your position, and what is unique about your city.
Certainly. Well, my job as public relations manager at Visit Anchorage, I'm responsible for writing the web content on our website, anchorage.net, also writing for the visitor's guide we produce annually, but also just in general telling people what there is to see and do in Anchorage, Alaska. And I feel very privileged to be able to do that because this is my adoptive hometown. I find it very easy to speak about something, about a place that I'm so passionate about personally anyway.
Jack, we are extremely impressed with Anchorage, in fact with all of Alaska. What an amazing last frontier this really is. And sort of like land of the midnight sun just about. Full light until 10 o'clock at night, and the sunny days we've seen here in the middle of July. Very impressive. Tell us more about why people flock to Alaska, this last beautiful frontier.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. A lot of people flock to Alaska because of the wildlife, of the glaciers, of Mount McKinley. They want an untouched, pristine, natural experience. And the nice thing about Anchorage is that all of these things are in very close proximity, either right here in the city itself or just a few minutes away. You look at glaciers, for example. A lot of people come up because they want to watch glaciers calve into the water. 60 of the most accessible glaciers in all of Alaska are within a 50-minute drive of Anchorage. It makes this very convenient for people who want to see a lot of the last frontier. Of course, having 22 hours of functional daylight on the longest day certainly doesn't hurt your opportunities to pack in as much as you can into Alaska.
22 hours of daylight on your longest day, that's most impressive. This state is so immense, people actually don't have roads to get everywhere.
Well, you're absolutely right. We always like to point out that if you were to take Alaska and cut it in half, you would make Texas the third largest state. The first half of Alaska would be the first, the second half would be the second largest state, and then Texas would move from second to third. So it's a very immense state, and there's a lot out there to explore. Thankfully, Anchorage especially is blessed with a whole lot of transportation options. We're not only central to the road system, we have the largest international airport in all of Alaska. We also have a huge place in the Alaska Railroad, what you'll hear locals refer to as the rail belt of Alaska, which basically stretches from the city of Seward in the south through Anchorage and on towards Fairbanks with Denali National Park along the way. I can tell you that that's one of the best ways and one of the most scenic ways to experience Alaska. They have these great cars on the trip, glass top, so you've got all of the mountain views, all of the wildlife viewing, and they connect to fantastic experiences in their own right. The train south from Anchorage to Seward hooks you up with Kenai Fjords National Park, which is an excellent place to go whale watching, to go kayaking. They have a fantastic marine life center down there called the Alaska Sea Life Center. To the north, as I said, you've got Denali National Park, but also the train continues through a place called Hurricane Gulch, which is a very, very famous spot, through the city of the town of Talkeetna, which is kind of this picturesque Alaska mountain town, and then on towards Fairbanks in the center of the state, which is in a completely different environment than anything that people have seen before they reach Fairbanks.
Tell us a little bit about the history of the state of Alaska.
Well, just like the state of Alaska is a huge geographic region, the history of Alaska goes back centuries and even millennia. Of course, you have Alaska natives who have been here for thousands and thousands of years, who originally came across the land bridge across the Bering Sea. After that, you have a whole period in time where Alaska is held by Russia before it's purchased by the United States in 1867. Of course, a lot of people have the gold rush in mind when they think of Alaska, and even near Anchorage, there are several small places, Indian Valley Mine, Crow Creek Mine down in Girdwood, that have a very rich gold rush history. When you look at Anchorage as a city in itself, our story really starts with transportation here in the last frontier. Anchorage was selected in 1915 as the hub for construction of the Alaska Railroad, which now, as I said, connects Seward through Anchorage into Fairbanks. And really, ever since that day, we've made our name known in transportation in one way or another. For a very long time, of course, the rail belt was the quickest way to get around. After that, we became a hub for jets coming over from Asia and Europe. So we were kind of known as the international air crossroads of the world. I think that continues today. We're still a place where people come to connect with all of Alaska, whether it be through the rail system, whether it be on the roads, through the international airport, or right next door at Lake Hood, there's a float plane base where on the busiest days you have anywhere between 400 and 500 takeoffs and landings. And those are all people that are going out to remote parts of Alaska that aren't connected by road or by rail.
One of the aspects I find interesting, thinking of tourism, is Alaska has these amazing resorts and hotels, ski resorts and other, and right here in Anchorage, we are staying at this fabulous Captain Cook Hotel with so much history in it. I see paintings and models of sailing ships from the good old days, and it's just astonishing. This hotel is like a museum. Tell us a little bit about accommodations in Anchorage and elsewhere.
And that's an excellent point. I think a lot of people are quite surprised, honestly, when they come to Anchorage and they see the variety of accommodations that they have at their disposal. Everything from family-owned bed and breakfasts of 1 or 2 rooms to places like the Hotel Captain Cook, which is one of the finest hotels in all of Alaska. Alyeska Resort, of course, very well known for its skiing, but also its downhill mountain biking. But you really get a fantastic spread, everything from the Backpackers Hostel to the Hotel Captain Cook to a place like the Copper Whale Inn, 14-room bed and breakfast right by the water. You really get the opportunity to select the accommodations and the level of service that best fits your needs and your dreams of an Alaska vacation. And cultural attractions are really a point of pride for us. If you look at the Anchorage Museum, they expanded in recent years, tripling their space. They were always quite well known as a place where you can explore Alaska history, Alaska art, but they've really expanded their game. You look at the Smithsonian Arctic Study Center that they have, it's 600 artifacts taken from the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and put on display back in their home state, really. You have items that represent each of the large cultural groups of Native Alaskans, everything from the Tsimshian and Haida of the southeast, all the way to the north to the Inupiaq, to the Yupik Island communities in western Alaska. You really get an excellent sense of how these cultures are similar, where they share traditions, and where those traditions diverge.
There are more than 90 languages spoken in this school district or the general Anchorage area. Please tell us about the cultural diversity of Anchorage.
That's right. It's 94 languages that they find are spoken in the Anchorage School District. As the largest city in the state, we attract a wide array of cultures. If you look at the largest spoken languages outside of English, you're looking at Tagalog. We have a large Filipino and Pacific Islander community. Russian, which I think is a holdover from our original ownership by the Russians. You also have Yupik, which is a native language spoken in western Alaska, and also Spanish. A lot of people don't realize that there is a very large population of Spanish speakers here as well. You get all these cultures together and mixed in a very surprising way. Almost anytime we have international visitors, they're surprised to find someone of their own culture. We also have a gentleman who's working on a Jewish historical museum for Alaska, which again is not one that a lot of people think of when they first think of Alaska.
A Jewish museum in Alaska, of all places. Well, let's talk about food and produce. It must be rather difficult to import oranges to this remote part of the United States. What is unique about the food and the restaurants of Anchorage?
Yeah, not too many oranges here. I will say that we have fantastic produce thanks to the Matanuska and Susitna Borough, which is just to the north of us. Things like cabbage, potatoes, carrots. Those 22 hours of daylight really do pay off in that our vegetables get very large in a very short growing period. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Alaska seafood. Of course, we have 5 species of salmon, but also halibut, rockfish, clams, oysters. It really does take pride of place in Alaska dining. And I think the nice thing about Anchorage is you get the opportunity to sample so many different kinds of locally grown and locally produced food in so many different styles. I think those cultures that we spoke about earlier are a little bit indicative of the kind of dining scene that Alaska has. Anything from Himalayan food through wine bistros, Chinese food, it really doesn't make a difference. You can find it here in Anchorage.
Jack, before we conclude, tell our audience about education in Anchorage and why you personally believe it's so important for individuals to visit and also experience firsthand what this part of the world is all about.
There's a very famous Alaska Native quote here that speaks to that. It says that what you do not see, what you do not hear, you will never truly know. And I think that's to the heart of education here in Alaska. I'm a product of Alaska schools as well, and I can tell you that finishing school here in Alaska opened up a whole variety of doors that I didn't think possible beforehand. I'm a product of a very good foreign language program at my high school, but if you look at the magnet schools they have for language immersion, for arts, for sciences, it really is a unique school system, and the backdrop that you have is excellent for natural sciences, for geology, for history. There are so many touch points in Alaska for education when you get right down to it.
Speaking of hands-on experiences, tell our audience a little bit about the local tours. Some people may be visiting for a couple of days only, have limited time, but they can jump on a seaplane or something else and see firsthand the glaciers and so forth. Tell us about that.
That's right, Richard. You can really jump into Alaska with both feet here in Anchorage. We have walking tours that last a little over an hour, anything from a ghost tour to a food tour of Anchorage, all the way up through trips out to a glacier. There are trips that you can take off on with a small plane on skis, and you can actually touch down on a glacier in the shadow of Mount McKinley. We have a great assortment of operators who can take you up to the face of a glacier, to a mountain, out to a remote stream, out to a remote lodge. If you have any interest in dog sledding, which is the state sport here in Alaska, there are several companies, including Salmonberry Tours, that can set you up with a real Iditarod musher here in Alaska year-round. This isn't something that just happens in March around the start of the Iditarod, but even in the summer, these mushers are opening their kennels and opening their homes to visitors to share with them the love that they have for Alaska's sport.
Jack, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so very much for being with us today.
We're glad to have you up.
And I certainly will come back to Alaska. This is just a really amazing state. Thank you so much.
Thank you.